everyone. Welcome to the Name One Player podcast. My name is Nicole. I am your host. And before we get into the episode, I just want to say a huge thank you to every single person for hitting play today. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. I don't know what episode you listened to in the past, but I'm so glad that you thought, hey, I like this, and I'm going to come back. I think that was a very wise and rational decision, and I am so glad that you are back today. On the flip side of that, if this is your first ever episode of the Name One Player podcast, huge welcome to you. I am so glad that you are here. I do not know how you found the podcast, but I am so happy that you did, and the absolute biggest of welcomes to you. The Name One Player podcast is a place for women to talk about the sports teams that they love without ever being asked to name one player on the sports teams that they love, because that's annoying. And I'm not going to do that. However, today I'm not actually going to do that with anybody because it is a solo episode. It is just me, and I'm not going to ask myself to name one player. But I do feel like the whole name one player vibe of being quizzed, of being made to prove your knowledge, really is appropriate for this topic that we are covering today. And that topic is bandwagon fans. Jumping on and supporting a team when that team is doing really well. And my opinion on it. Spoiler, I think that it's fine. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a good thing to do, and we will get into all of my thoughts on that. But I did want to talk about how I kind of came up with this idea, and it really wasn't me. It's been my past guests who just all say the most insightful and intelligent things. And this last episode that I did, we had Liz on, and we were talking about the beginning of the National Hockey League season. And Liz works for Winnipeg Sports News, so she does a lot of work covering the Winnipeg Jets. And she made a comment just saying that a lot of women in particular tell her, like, hey, I don't really know too much about hockey. I only follow the Jets in the playoffs. And she says to them, girl, that's literally the best time to start following the team, because during the playoffs, you're getting the absolute best hockey that's being played. You have the best teams that have made it to the playoffs and are now vying to beat out all the other best teams, and then you have the best team standing. So if you were going to pick a time to invest in a certain sport, why would it not be during the playoffs or the postseason? So that was a really good point, and I had never really thought about it that way. But when she had made that comment, it did stick with me, and I was thinking about it a lot during the American League Championship Series that the Toronto Blue Jays have just won. Today is Tuesday. Yesterday was Game 7 of the ALCS, and it was good. It was so fun to watch. And Liz also, in the previous episode, she mentions the term casual fan. And I had never really thought of using that term before, but I do think it's kind of the perfect term for the way that I enjoy baseball. Before the postseason started for the MLB, I wouldn't have really considered myself a fan of a particular team, but I would consider myself somebody who enjoys baseball. I know some of the more basic rules. I can watch a game and I can follow along with what's going on. I love the atmosphere of both minor league and major league games. I have gone to a couple of different really amazing ballparks. I can appreciate the history and just how remarkable some of these stadiums are. So yeah, absolutely nothing against baseball. Am I sitting down and am I watching regular season games on my TV? Not necessarily. Definitely not in the way that I'm watching football games and now hockey games. I will schedule my day around watching the Minnesota Vikings. In fact, I really don't do anything on Sundays, Thursday nights, and Monday nights. Like, my schedule is just, I'm busy, okay? But baseball, I feel like, is a bit of a different situation. However, this might change moving into next season because the Blue Jays are the only Canadian team in the MLB, and they are doing so well. They have now made it to the World Series, which is such an incredible feat. Again, I'm not even a huge baseball fan, but I know that making it to the World Series is a big freaking deal. And the fact that the Toronto Blue Jays have done it, I feel like has really brought this country together. And I actually posted a TikTok about this the other day, that I do think it's a really beautiful thing. I don't think it's a bad thing at all that there are people who are not watching the regular season and then watching the postseason and really getting excited for the Blue Jays, because the Blue Jays are doing some really amazing things right now. So why would you not be excited about it? And again, keeping Lissa's comments in mind, like, you are getting the best baseball. Why would you not be locked in on that? So I post this TikTok and a lot of people have similar views about it. And I watched the game. Toronto wins. A great game, very stressful game, but a great game. It was a game to make somebody a baseball fan, is the way that I would put it. And I posted 2 separate Instagram stories referencing the Blue Jays win on my personal Instagram. And I get a message request from some guy that I know. I do know him, but I don't follow him back. So he follows me, I don't follow him. So I feel like that tells you enough about how close I am to this person. And I open the DM and he says something along the lines of, I know that you don't like baseball and I know that you don't like Toronto, because I had a conversation with this person a few years ago and had mentioned that I'm a huge football fan, but I don't really follow baseball. And I met this person, he's Canadian. I met him when I was living in London. He was also living there. And we talked about the fact that I just don't love Toronto. Like, Toronto and Vancouver have a little bit of a rivalry. I would say maybe it's one-sided. Maybe Toronto doesn't care about the rivalry, but like, I, as a Vancouverite, I think Vancouver is the superior city. So he's not incorrect, I guess, technically, in saying those things. There is some truth to those statements, I guess, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I don't like baseball. Like I said, I really do enjoy going to baseball games, especially after watching the ALCS and watching this caliber of baseball. I 100% am a baseball fan. Like, I can respect how amazing this sport is. I will go on the record of saying that. However, I definitely didn't recognize that before. So I'm really excited that watching baseball, becoming a bandwagon fan, if you will, has made me realize that. So I just kind of laughed it off. I didn't really think about it. I didn't get called a bandwagon fan, but I did get called out a little bit of like, you don't watch baseball. I know you don't watch baseball. Why are you now posting about baseball? And I'm posting about baseball because I like baseball now. Okay, sue me. Like, what do you want me to say? And I love my country. I'm patriotic. I love when the one Canadian team in the MLB does well. I also love when the Toronto Raptors do well. When they had that playoff run a few years ago and won, that was electric. Canada was united, and that's what's happening again here. So now I'm already thinking like, okay, I should do an episode about this. I should do an episode just kind of talking about this and talking about people's views about it. And then I open TikTok and I open Twitter, just kind of scrolling through my phone like I usually do. And I really do love that I have kind of curated my For You page and the social media that I consume to show me more female sports content creators than males. So with that being said, I did see a lot of women posting about the fact that they were at the game, posting the fact that they were watching the game, and just posting their excitement about the fact that the Blue Jays are going to the World Series, because it's an exciting thing. But I was really disappointed to see a lot of men in the comments saying, you're a bandwagon fan. You know, you don't actually know the Blue Jays. Name 1 Blue Jays player, name 5 Blue Jays player. You only think they're hot. You're only cheering for them because they're in the playoffs. You're only cheering for them because they're going to the World Series. Whatever. And then I was like, okay, okay, we're doing an episode on this. We haven't done a solo episode in a while, and we are now going to talk about the negative connotation surrounding bandwagon fans and people supporting teams when they're doing well in the playoffs. And this idea of gatekeeping sports for real fans only, and what real fans even are. And then, because it is the Name One Player podcast, we are going to talk about the discrepancies between men posting about sports and women posting about sports, and just the difference in comments that I saw on women's posts versus men's posts about their excitement for the Blue Jays. So yeah, So I'll do my best to not ramble. I'll do my best to kind of keep some general structure to this. But I just thought it would be fun to get on here and talk about where this idea of you need to know every single thing about a sport or a team in order to vocally and openly support this team. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know where that idea came from necessarily. I have some theories and we're going to chat about my theories, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts as well. Maybe there's something that you feel like I didn't touch on. Maybe there's something you completely disagree with. And if that's the case, I'd love to hear it, please. I really do love healthy back and forth conversation about these kind of things. But yeah, I think a nice segue into really getting into the meat and bones of this episode is starting with discussing the idea of what a real fan is. Like, I know there's obviously like a Webster's dictionary definition of fan. I imagine it comes from the word fanatic. Actually, you know what? No, I was gonna say I'm not gonna look it up, but I actually will look it up. Fan definition. Let's see. Oh, it's telling me like a fan. Maybe let me look up fanatic. Okay, so this is the definition on Wikipedia, which I know anybody can just type in. So maybe I should go and type in and be like, you don't need to know every single thing about the sport in order to be a fan. But anyways, Wikipedia tells me a fan or fanatic, sometimes termed an aficionado or enthusiast. Am I even saying that right? Aficionado? I think I am, hopefully. I don't know. Let me know if I'm saying it wrong. Is a person who exhibits strong interest or admiration for something or somebody. So if we're going off of that definition, admiration for something, a sports team, I 100% am a baseball fan. I 100% am a Toronto Blue Jays fan. I have so much admiration for the way that they won this ALCS. The fact that they lost 2 games at home in Toronto and then came back and were able to win in a game 7, I think is amazing. But I don't know everything there is to know about baseball. I really don't. But in the definition of fan, it doesn't say that I need to know every single thing. It doesn't say that I need to know every single stat about a sport. It doesn't say that I need to know every single rule that there is to know in a sport. It doesn't say anything about the amount of games that I have to watch in order to consider myself a fan. And this is a big one. This is a big one that I understand people's thinking surrounding this, but I don't necessarily agree with it. A big one that I kept seeing is you're not a fan if you haven't been there for the losses. If you haven't been there for all of the Blue Jays, we'll use that as an example, for all the heartbreaking losses that they've endured. If you haven't been there through the lows, then you shouldn't be there for the highs, I guess, is that sentiment. And I can understand that idea of, years of loyalty definitely does show that you are engaged and you have admiration and love for that team. But I think the biggest thing to point out is that knowledge does not equal passion. You can know every single stat. That's totally okay. But if we're looking at the definition of, again, fan or fanatic as having admiration for a team, you knowing every single stat doesn't mean that you admire a team any more than somebody who doesn't, than somebody who's just learning about a team. And I also think the thing with that too is that if you can rattle off every statistic of a team that you love from the last 10 years, that's really cool. Sure. My brain doesn't work that way. It probably will never work that way. But if you are that person, I think it's very important to acknowledge the fact that you were not born knowing every single statistic. And maybe you learn those statistics from watching from a very young age. That very well could be the case. That shows you've been a fan for a very long time for sure. But the length of being a fan doesn't mean that you get an award for being a fan. Maybe there are awards out there actually, like longest season ticket holder or something. I'm sure there is something like that, or like oldest fan. I'm sure there are awards of that, whatever. But it doesn't make you better than somebody who doesn't know every single thing, or who is so obsessed with the sport and is learning a lot as quickly as they can, but they only just became a fan recently, more recent than maybe somebody else. If you're looking at two people and you're judging if somebody is more of a fan based off of the time that somebody has been a fan, I don't necessarily know that you're getting an accurate picture. But to follow that, I don't necessarily know that we should ever be pitting two people against each other who love the same sport, who love the same team. Why does it need to be a competition? Why do we even have this definition of, oh, a real fan? And why have we turned being a fan into a competition? There's a competition that we are watching, and that's if the team that we love is going to win the game or not. That's the competition that we should be focusing on, not about who's the bigger fan and why you're the bigger fan. Unless, again, there are like biggest fan competitions. If you're like winning Super Bowl tickets or something, yeah, you should definitely advocate for why you are the biggest fan. But in general, day-to-day conversations, especially in the comments of TikToks and replies on Twitter and Instagram DMs, we don't need to be comparing the level of fandom and putting other people down if they're not on the level of fandom that you think you're at. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. Now, moving on to our next little topic to reference in this episode is the idea of bandwagoning. And now that we have a definition of what a fan is, and we'll use the definition of somebody who admires someone or something, like a sport or a sports team. I'm not going to look into the definition of what bandwagoning is, but my definition is supporting a team when they are doing well. Not necessarily supporting them before, but hopping on that support bandwagon when the team is doing well. This has so many negative connotations to it, but my hot take, I guess you could say, is that I don't think bandwagon fans are a bad thing. I don't think supporting a team when they are doing well, like having an exceptionally well playoff run, I don't think that is a bad thing at all. Because when I think of bandwagoning or supporting a team when they're doing well, the way that I think of it is it's just enthusiasm increasing as the stakes get higher. For me, for baseball, we'll continue to use that example with baseball and the Blue Jays. The regular season, there's so many games. There's 162 baseball games. The stakes are not that high in a regular baseball game. Of course, I know there's like playoff seeding and all that good stuff, but 162 games, like it's the stakes aren't high enough for me. I like other things when the stakes aren't high, like football. Even when the stakes are low, I still will follow the Minnesota Vikings very closely. But there's a lot of people with football who don't want to, who will only watch during the playoffs, and that is completely okay. Because again, you are getting the best of the teams when you are in the playoffs. And I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying that and then your enthusiasm building as the stakes get even higher. That's just a normal human psychology thing. If the stakes are higher, there's more investment. I would be very curious to see the viewership numbers of game 1 of the ALCS versus game 7. Game 1, sure. If you're following along, maybe you do want to see what's going on, but if you're not, maybe it doesn't mean that much to you because you know that you have to win 4 games. Game 1, you're not nearly as invested. Game 7, knowing this is win or go home for either of the teams that are playing, those stakes are very high. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, personally. Sports are a business. At the end of the day, bandwagon fans, people who are hopping on that bandwagon enthusiasm is good for business. It is good for the sport. It's good for the team. It's good for the league. The merch sales, oh my gosh, I bought this super cute Blue Jays hat. I'm really excited to get it. I'm not gonna get it by Friday, but I'll post it once I get it. It's a little different. It has like a little flower. I like it. So that's an extra. I don't know what percentage of the merchandise sales from 47 hats goes towards the Toronto Blue Jays, but it is a little bit. It is a little bit. And, you know, again, the viewership numbers of, I was watching Sportsnet, of how that goes up and how that ends up affecting really everything across the league is really interesting. This goes back to the whole, I've said this so many times about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, when a lot of women became fans of the Chiefs because of Taylor Swift and people were freaking out about it. And how many people just were watching the NFL in order to get a glimpse of Taylor Swift? The amount of people mad about it, but I just looked at it, I'm like, look, this is more money for the NFL. Any pair of eyes watching a game is extra money. The more money that teams are getting, and I do know baseball is a bit of a different thing with salary caps and everything, and I actually just recently learned about this, that baseball doesn't have salary caps, the teams. That's crazy, because the argument that I used to make with the Chiefs is that this is more money in the Chiefs' pockets. This literally directly correlates to players getting paid more money. Your favorite players getting paid more money. I don't know enough about baseball to know how that necessarily works and viewership and how that correlates to the league getting money. I'm not going to speak on that, but my guess is that it does good things, okay? Money is never a bad thing in terms of business, I guess. Well, if we're talking about this, but if we want to get philosophical, we can have a whole conversation about if money is a good or bad thing, but we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is bandwagon fans and the fact that they make sports teams money. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I really, truly do not. The other thing that bandwagon fans are good for are, talking about things, building that momentum. We've already said bandwagoning is just that enthusiasm growing even more. But the more people posting about it, the more people are talking about it. And this is something that I touched on when we talked about the definition of a sports fan, of what an actual fan is the fact that every single sports fan started somewhere. And I would not be surprised if a large majority of sports fans started during a playoff run, if they were bandwagon fans themselves. And it is really cool to think about. Like, when I wrote down this point for this episode, it is kind of cool. It's like, I maybe will watch baseball for the rest of my life, and people might ask me, hey, how did you become a Blue Jays fan? And I'm going to be able to reference the 2025 World Series. Who knows what's going to happen? Hopefully the Blue Jays win. That'll be really nice. But even if they don't, I have gotten so invested in baseball and this team and learning about the sport. I actually even said to my good friend Taylor, who is a huge Blue Jays and baseball fan, and she's very knowledgeable, and I'm texting her every game, and just like little things where I'm like, hey, like what happened here? What was the nuance to this? Like, tell me a little bit about this. And I even said to her that playoff baseball might be better than playoff football. And that's a whole different conversation. I won't get into all of my points there. I'm not even sure if I necessarily agree with that point yet, but that's how I felt during the game. And when I said that, I was like, wow, like, football is my one true love in this world. And the fact that I'm like, hey, baseball is kind of on to something here. I do really think that baseball is something that I will follow for a very long time. And I will have absolutely no shame when somebody asks me, how did you become a Blue Jays fan? And I'm going to say it's because I didn't really care about baseball all too much. I liked it. It was fine. But then they did real dang good in the postseason, and they made it to the World Series, and I followed along, and I really enjoyed baseball ever since. And the fun part of it is that I was able to cheer along with my entire country. And that's another reason why I think people don't like the whole bandwagon idea. It's, they're very protective over their teams. Kind of touching on that loyalty aspect that I mentioned previously. It's like, yes, I do understand that when an entire country hops on this bandwagon, again, if we're going to use that term, I can understand why it may be frustrating to be like, okay, you weren't there for it all. At that point, I can understand your reasoning. But if you truly loved the team that you love, why would you not be so happy about the fact that an entire country is now cheering for your team to win the World Series, whatever sport it may be? I love the Minnesota Vikings with my heart and soul. And if they made it to the Super Bowl, one of these days, one of these years, it's gonna happen, okay? Is it this year? I don't know. That's besides the point. The point is, if they made it to a Super Bowl and people were cheering for the Minnesota Vikings, we're now down to 2 teams, and the world wants the Minnesota Vikings to win this game, I would be so happy. Are you kidding? I would not judge anybody for hopping on this bandwagon of a team. Because also, too, talking about stakes, there's 2 teams left. If you want to enjoy a baseball game, and a lot of people, when they do, myself included, I want somebody to cheer for. I want to increase those stakes, and I want to form that connection and cheer for somebody. You got 2 teams left, so you're gonna pick one team, right? And the fact that pretty well an entire country is behind a team, I think is really special, and I don't think is a negative thing whatsoever. What I do think is a negative thing is the difference that I have seen of women getting called out of being a bandwagon fan versus men. And I'm not saying that men aren't getting called out for it. What I am saying is that I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it at all. Maybe scrolling through, I've seen it. I don't know, but it hasn't registered to me. The way that it's registering, that I'm seeing so many women being called out for being a bandwagon fan. So when I was scrolling through and seeing these posts from these amazing female sports content creators and seeing some of the comments, let me be very clear, so many of the comments were so positive and just sharing the excitement that these women were having. But there were some comments that stuck out and did take away from that, unfortunately. And it is just sad. And it made me think about another guest that I had on, Shandy. It was a really great episode. We were talking about the Minnesota Vikings, but she shared an experience where she went to a Lions game. It was Lions Vikings, and just how horribly she was treated there. And the conversation kind of turns to talking about how men in particular, and again, this is all a blanket statement, but there are a lot of these men that exist, but they want women to watch sports with them. So like, oh, I wish my girlfriend would watch with me, or oh my God, I can't watch sports because my wife doesn't, whatever. And just wanting the women in their lives to be engaged in sports. But then in the same breath, a lot of these same men, when they meet women who know about sports, who love to talk about sports, love to watch sports, it's met with a lot of criticism. And that's what I was finding a lot of yesterday when I was looking through social media, just a lot of criticism for the excitement that women had about the Blue Jays. And it's funny. It's not funny, but it is funny if I'm going to use that as the word here. The man that sent me the DM that I referenced at the beginning of this episode, a DM, when I had this conversation with him in person a few years ago, I had mentioned about the fact that I loved football and it just brings me so much joy. And he brought the conversation back to baseball, and I was like, well, do you watch baseball? And I said, well, no, not really. Like, I really do focus mainly on football. Like, that's the sport that I love. And he was quite disappointed in the fact that I didn't watch baseball, and was telling me all about why baseball is better than football. And I honestly should have walked away from the conversation, but I didn't. I was like, okay, whatever, sure. I disagree with you, but all right, that's fine. And then I go and post that I'm watching these baseball games, and it is met with, you don't watch baseball. What are you talking about? I do think that's funny. What's that mean when a woman says? I just think it's funny how, so we're not quite bothered on that level, but I do think it's funny that there is this group of men who do want women in their lives to watch the sports they watch, love the sports that they love, but in a very specific way. And I don't even think that they know in what way they want women to watch sports or to be involved in sports, because I know in my experience personally, and looking at women who do talk about sports and share their love of sports, there is this line of, if you aren't talking about it enough or you don't show enough knowledge, that means you're a fake fan. You know, you don't know enough. If you're not talking about it all the time, if you're not listing off all the stats, then you don't know enough and you shouldn't be talking and you're a fake fan. But then if you do start to rattle off statistics and you do start to mention a lot of players and gameplay and a deeper level of understanding of the game, whatever sport you may be talking about, that is far too much. You are trying too hard. One time I got told that I was a pick-me, and it actually really annoyed me because they used, I think this is like a top tier insult when you say, oh, did he pick you yet? I think that's hilarious. I think that's so funny. But the fact that I was just talking about the Minnesota Vikings, this was a long time ago. I was talking about JJ McCarthy before he started playing. It annoyed me because I love that. I love that insult. I think it's like top tier insult. But I was not trying in any way to give out a vibe that I was only talking about this because I wanted a man to show interest in me and to pick me. I laugh when people assume that of women, that they are only getting into sports so that men like them. And I think if I wanted a man, if I wanted to impress a man, sports wouldn't be the way that I would go about it. I would do a lot of other things, but I wouldn't put myself through the pain of being a Minnesota Vikings fan to get a man to like me. Like, to me, I genuinely do not see the connection in any way. So that's a little point about that. But I do think that there is this discomfort that men have with women being involved in sports in any way. And this is a whole multi-layered thing. I won't get too far into this topic here, but I do think it's really important to know when we are talking about the idea of being a bandwagon or the idea of gatekeeping sports or labeling somebody as a real fan or a fake fan. I think that it happens significantly more with women in a much more hateful and misogynistic way than it does with men. And this might stem from the fact that sports for a very long time was this boys club. Women were not allowed to be involved in it and weren't talking about sports, weren't showing their love of sports. And now that there are women doing that and women having professional careers in sports, men just aren't comfortable with it. Again, blanket statement, there's a lot of men who either don't care or who think it's really cool. But then there's some men who literally think that it means that the world is ending and we are all doomed. And we've touched on this before. I think with those men, the issue stems from a place of insecurity and jealousy when women are in spots that they wish that they could be in. Talking about sports online, there's so many men who would probably love to share their opinions online about their favorite team making it to the World Series. But the fact that a woman is able to have that confidence to do it and they're not, it upsets them from a place of jealousy and insecurity. But the other layer to it, I do think a lot of these men that we're using the blanket statement for is that they just don't like to see women having fun. They just don't like to see women enjoying things, particularly things that for a very long time were reserved for men to enjoy, but just life in general, just seeing a happy woman going through life, finding joy in things. Nuh-uh. They don't vibe with it, which is very sad, but a very real reality. And the name of this podcast, Name One Player, like it is a joke and it is poking fun at the men that do quiz you and want you to prove your knowledge of sports, but it also is a very real and very deep-rooted societal issue. And I do think it's gotten so much better, and I really do love having the conversations with guests on here when I ask them about their favorite Name One Player story, and I do think that men are getting smarter and are realizing that, like, it's just kind of a silly question to ask, that it makes them look really lame, honestly. So I'm glad that we're not getting as much of it, but just the fact that a large chunk of society does still have the opinion that women can't enjoy sports in the same way that men do is sad. And I really do hope that it changes one day, but I do think we still have a ways to go. Sports are so much fun, and I just really don't see any positive reason why you would want to like hold on to it and gatekeep it, like keep it away from an entire group of people enjoying it, whether that be women or whether it be people who have only been watching the sport for a very short amount of time. I don't get it. Sports are for everybody, and everybody should be allowed to enjoy. Everybody should be allowed to have a little glimmer of happiness and watch a sports team do a really cool thing, like win the ALCS or the World Series. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens here. I really do genuinely feel that sports are for everyone. There are so many types of fans, and they all have such a huge place and importance in whatever sport it may be. You're gonna have those fans who have been fans since birth and love the sport so much and can list off every single statistic that there ever possibly is just from memory. And then you'll also have those fans who can't do that, who hate numbers, but who know all about the players' histories and where they went to school and all about their families and the importance of playing for whatever team they may be playing for. You also might have those fans who are only watching during the playoffs and know very little about the sport that they're watching, but they know that somebody that they love is watching the sport and really excited about it. And they bring this new curiosity and energy to the game and might become a lifelong fan and might only watch during the playoffs for the rest of their lives. And that's okay. You have those fans who have decided that they wanted a career in sports and put in so much time and energy and work into getting to a place where they can talk about sports professionally and make money from it. And then you might have those fans who like to make little TikTok edits of their favorite players or go online and talk to people on social media about the sports teams that they love. And every single one of those fans is a fan. There is not one fan of this whole group who is the best fan, and they are all very different fans, and they are all very important to the ecosystem. Maybe let's use that word of sports, because again, sports are a business, and the more people watching sports, the better it's going to do, the more money it's going to bring in, and the longer the sport will be around for. I do often think too, it's like if you only had the people who were those diehard mathematician fans, football probably wouldn't be around for all that long. If that was a requirement to like go into a game, that you have to be able to list off 5 players and explain the penalties, there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of people who would be in that stadium. And it does make me sad to think that there are people who want to get involved in sports but do have this idea of what a fan is. So if you are somebody who loves sports, I really recommend you bring somebody under your wing and to show them that there are so many different ways of being a fan. If you are a fan who does kind of have that opinion that you can only be a fan if you can list off XYZ about whatever sport it may be, I challenge you to think about it a little bit differently, because again, if you're only letting people who you feel are on your level of fandom enjoy the sport, and you love the sport, if you do love the sport, you understand that it's really an amazing thing, why would you want to block people from sharing the thing that you love? Unless you just want to hold on to it so tight, which I can understand that side of things, but then the sport is not going to grow. Believe it or not, you do need those casuals and those bandwagon fans to bring new life to a sports league, and I really do think that is for all sports leagues across the world. That is all that I have. I definitely rambled a lot this episode, but let me know if you agree with any of the thoughts I have. If you disagree with any of the thoughts too, totally let me know. I'd love to hear it. If you are a Blue Jays fan, me too. I am super excited. This episode's going to come out on Thursday, so by the time this episode is out, Game 1 of the World Series will be tomorrow, Friday, playing against the Dodgers, which is exciting. I mean, if anything, I am excited to go back and kind of look at the history between the Blue Jays and Dodgers. I don't know about it, but I'm really excited to learn. That was one of my favorite parts about learning about football, was learning about all the rivalries, especially with the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm excited. I'm excited to learn about the history of the Blue Jays. But if that is not interesting to you in any way, shape, or form, maybe it's more interesting for you to look up the WAGs of the MLB. Are WAG jackets a thing? Like, I know in hockey, WAG jackets, like the wives and girlfriends, they'll have a jacket for the playoffs. Is that something in the MLB? Please let me know if that is, because that also is something that I want to look into. But whatever way you are enjoying whatever sport it is that you are enjoying, I absolutely love that for you. Keep doing it, and don't let anybody tell you how to be a fan. All right, everybody, that is all from me. I don't know if I have any Mariners fans listening, but If I do, I hope you guys are okay. I hope you. What was the other team that lost? What, the Milwaukee Brewers? I guess that was the other team. Yeah, if you are a Brewers or Mariners fan, I hope you guys are okay. I hope everybody's okay. But special thoughts to those two fan bases. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could engage with the Name One Player podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. If it gives you an option to rate the show, like the show, some platforms let you comment. I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on the episode. All right, everybody, I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Take care, everyone. Bye.